Hello YouTubers. This is the 9th video where we continue our Blazor series. The last time we talked about, building Blazor components. We talked a little bit, we touched very lightly on building base components. We built a little bit of a text box base, and then we used that text box base to put some information into it, and we test drove the entire student registration component. In this video here, we're gonna continue that story. We're gonna continue the story of building out a registration form for a student, but this time we're gonna build a little bit more of base components for the student date of birth, for the gender. I'm gonna show you something very exciting about the most beautiful way that you can actually, or one of the most beautiful ways you can actually do a two-way binding with a child component versus a parent component. I had to scout the entire internet to find out, better ways than this particular way. But, this is the one that I actually settled on, and I hope that you feel free to drop a comment in the comment section if you know about any other way. But for this one, this is the one that I would actually adopt it as a standard for building base components for Blazor, and then move forward until something better comes along. So let's, without any further ado, let's just go ahead and, jump into, let me increase the screen size here to 175 so people on their phones are able to see everything. And let me make Visual Studio go with a little bit smaller. Let's share our screen here. All right. So let's go back to our map first. I think our map was Blazor videos. Let's go here, and then let's go to our map. All right. So the last time we talked about, Blazor, just to remind people a little bit of where this video is headed. We talked a little bit about our components, right? And we talked about, how things are connected. We built our brokers and services, view services, and we built a bunch of base components. Actually, today, there's a couple of those are not really ready yet, so I'm going to put them in orange. And then later on, we're going to actually flip that color back into green. So the base components that we want to build here, which is very important ones, is to be able to actually have a student gender and be able to have a student date of birth, right? And this one here is going to be a little bit interesting because this one is a drop down, and there's another one that's a date time. The drop down one is the most interesting one because you basically want to allow any enum of any kind. So this is the idea here. I want to allow any enum out there on the system that is using this base component. I want the base component to be able to actually look at the enum that you're passing in as a type, as an input parameter, and then be able to turn that into a drop-down, right? So it can be any number of enums that you're passing in, and it's going to take that enum and it's actually going to process it and turn it into something useful. And, along the way, you're going to learn a little bit about some really nice tagging that we can use, and some other things that, we will go into when the time comes. So anyway, without any further ado, let's just go ahead and go back to our code here. And first and foremost, if you look at the model, our student view model here, obviously, we did the identity number, first name, middle name, last name, but we never did the birth date and the gender, right? And we want to make sure that we test drive this. We want to make sure that these things are in the right place at the right time. So let's just go ahead and start building those, right? So I'm going to go ahead in here and just go ahead and say I want to build a new base component. Let me make sure my camera is not covering up your vision here. All right, and let's call this a Dropdown Base. So it's a drop-down. We want to allow that drop-down to take an enum, a completely generic enum, and be able to process it. I want you to be very focused with me because there's a lot of dense information that I want to tell you about today. So all right, so this is the front end of that enum. Let's just go ahead and create the C# class behind that. So it's dropdown base.razor.cs. Right, so that's the back end of the front end. And let's partialize this because it's a part of the actual class. And here's component base, so people know, whether you are when you say uninitialized async, it actually makes sense because you're pulling that from somewhere. legitimate. So right, all of this is great, but I want to allow my drop-down base. If I leave it as is, right, like this, it's not going to help me out, because the problem here is that I can pass in. I don't know how to pass in a generic type of an enum, right? So this is where things get interesting. There's something that you can throw on top here that's called type param, type parameter, and that turns your Blazor component immediately into a component that can accept types, generic types. And you can pick up those generic types and do whatever you want with them. You want to treat them like an enum, by all means. You want to treat them like something else, why not, right? In our case here, it's going to be tenum, and I'm calling it, you can call it anything. For all intents and purposes, call it whatever makes sense to you. Tenum is basically saying I need a type, and I need this type to be an enumerator, an enum. So that's that guy. But also, in order for this to work, you also want to actually go here and say this guy is also accepting a generic type tenum. So that way we have these two values. Now we can operate within that, right? If you look a little bit in the past, when we set text box base, we made sure that we have a value in here. In our case, the value is going to be the enum itself, right? So the enum itself, the value type is going to be the enum itself. Since this enum is actually a generic type, then we need something to pass in so we can use it, right? So now I can go ahead in here and say, you know, I need a parameter, and this parameter is going to be of a type tenum, and that's going to be my value right here. All right, so that's off the bat, one of the first things that we need to understand. This way, my component, my generic component, can actually, you could just pass to it and any kind of enum, and immediately it's just going to turn it into a list, and you can select from that list. And later on, we're going to talk about binding. I'm trying to find, you know, for you, the best, most simplistic way you can actually do something like that, and I hope that you enjoy it today. So, all right, so that's the tenum. Let's go ahead and, you know, add a little bit more to that. So, okay, I know that this is an enumerator. You know, I know that this is an enum, and I want to actually process that enum in a way that actually prints out all the values of that enum. So, if we are building native components, and again, like I said to you, at some point in time, we're going to have to go and change all of our backend. That's the whole intent of actually building base components, is that we're going to go and change this entire backend with something like Syncfusion or Telerik or any other open source Blazor library that gives you a bunch of, you know, free components out of the box. And we will talk a little bit about why you need out of the box components instead of building your own. But in order for this tutorial to be actually useful for you, I need to actually show you how to build things fundamentally from scratch for free, you know, without any licensing or any of that headache, you know, so you can just, you know, move forward with building your own components without actually having to worry about, without actually tightly coupling your skill set to a particular out-of-the-box UI components. All right, so that's our guy right here. Now I want to select, and I want this select here. So this is the equivalent of a drop-down, right? This is the native drop-down. It's completely abstracted away in these base components. And I have that select. Now inside that select is the tricky part, right? I want to go here and say I want to print this out. So let me create a little bit of a safe space for me to code here. And I'm going to go here and say enum value. Right, and in this enum value, I want to go ahead in here and say enum.getValues, because I'm passing in the enum itself, and I'm going to pass in here the type of the tenum. See what I just did there? So what I'm basically saying in here, whatever enum I'm passing in as an input parameter, go and get all the values out of that type, and then start printing them out. Because we don't know what the value is, I'm putting it as a var. You know, thinking about it, I wonder if I can just do it this way. Yeah, because, you know, if the right side is not super clear about, you know, the type, you can only use var in two cases. If you don't know what's coming from the outside world, you're pulling out something from the internet, you know, it could be a JSON, it could be anything. It could be an array, it could be a byte array, and you're pulling it, so you're saying this is var, yes, when you don't know what the type is on the right side. Or when you know what the type is on the right side, which is kind of confusing for some people. Like I always tell people, if you're going and saying var student equal get student, you can't do that because the in here the type in here is not clear, and you need to be clear about the type. So the person reading your code, it's not that it's not that the compiler is not going to build it. The compiler is going to build it, and it's going to build it right, but from a readability standpoint, it doesn't really give the person the idea about what you're actually building, especially with things that are more complicated, like ensure student exists. I don't know what that returns. Even the method name could be fine. I don't know what that means. So I know the type in here, so I have to go and say student. Or when I actually don't know what the type is at all, like get stream async, you're hitting the internet and whatever is coming back, and then later on you're gonna serialize. So I apologize about the little tangent, but let's just go ahead and say, okay, for this enum type, enum value, I'm gonna go ahead in here and print this out. And in native native HTML, you can print these as options, right? So now in my options, I can very confidently go ahead and say this is my enum value like this. That's it. That's all the magic that you have to do. You're basically passing in an enum value, and this enum value will try to, the system is going to try to process this and print it out. I don't know, does this work? I don't know. Let's find out if that's actually the case. So let's go ahead let's use this, right? And we got to drive it. We're just not going to write some code in there and say, yeah, it works. And for starters, I'm just going to go to the student registration here. Let me keep the submit button at the bottom. Out of, software craftsmanship, let's just do it right. So let's go here and say Dropdown Base, and as you can see, this guy is asking for a type. Our type is the student view gender, which is basically what we're looking for to put at a drop down. So it's student view gender right here. I'd be surprised if this is not already available, and that's in here your drop down student gender drop down. There you go. So from a naming convention perspective, you're basically saying what value you want to get in, and then the type of the UI component that's actually containerizing this. If you start with dropdown, you're honoring more the type of the parameter itself versus the actual business value that you're trying to deliver. All right, so I have this student view gender, and this is a dropdown. Let's go ahead and write a test. And in that test, let's go ahead and say, hey, this is this value should be null at the beginning. So let's go ahead in here and say initial student component dot student dropdown, student gender dropdown should be null. So that's the first one. So let's go ahead and run this guy. Here we go. Obviously, this one should pass off the bat, because this is just saying I'm not really assuming any default values in my UI component at the beginning, right? So my UI component in here, my student gender dropdown should just be null. It shouldn't have any initial values. It ensures that even if anyone not necessarily change the behavior of your application, but change the initial values that come out of your application, you can very easily just go and say, no, it should be actually null. It should not be attached to anything. So let's just go ahead and here, this guy should be passing. There you go. So that's great. So let's, log this in. So this here is a pass, which is great. So let's take that. Boom, pass. All right, that's the first guy. The second guy should be fail. The second guy in here should say, so we don't really have a sort of a particular placeholder for this. It usually comes in with its own DDMMYYYY, which is basically the formatting of the time. But what we really care about is that we want to go here and say that this is text box this is student entity, should not be null. Okay, perfect. So all the way down before the button here, I'm going to go and say this dot rendered student component dot instance student gender drop down, right? Should not be null. There you go. So that's basically me ensuring that, and out of just, cleanliness, for every other one of these, I tested the label or the placeholder, so I should also do the same in here. So this is the button label and the button should not be null. So this here is basically me saying that this test should fail if I actually don't have the corresponding markup for this dropdown. So now I expect this test to fail because I didn't really put a markup for this guy on the front end. Let's see what that looks like. Here we go. All right, and this guy is failing basically. So it's failing because it'll say I expected this object not to be null, and it was. And if you click on this, it will point you exactly at the student gender dropdown. So let's just go ahead and pick up this test name and say fail. So this is test driven. The test has failed. I couldn't actually get the we couldn't verify that the UI is actually reflecting this component. So let's move ahead and let's go actually put that guy in there. So I'm just going to go ahead under last name and go and say BR. We're going to change a lot of, the styling and all that. We're just getting basic functionality in, and then later on we'll make it work. The rule is, make it work, then make it right, and make it pretty. So you got to get something working first, then fix it to match your standard, then actually put the final touches. I see a lot of people get a little bit obsessed about, oh, the button doesn't look right, but the button doesn't work at all. So it doesn't really matter whether it's good or not. It doesn't matter if you have a car, that is beautiful, but there's no engine there. So you got to get the engine in there, and you got to make sure that it's working. That's why they call us engineer. We make things, work. We are the engine of the industry. So let's just go ahead and say, okay, so this is my drop-down base. And I'm going to put a reference here, like we talked last time. And this reference will be student gender dropdown. What else is this guy asking for? It's asking for the TEnum, right? It's going to complain if I don't give it the TEnum. So I'm going to go ahead in here and say type off, like this. And the type off here is the student gender. Student view gender, what did I call it? Student view gender. Great. Let's go back here. Here we go. Right, and it doesn't know what this is because it needs the namespace. So here's OSSS, portal web views models, web models, and then student views. There you go. Great. So I gave it the two input parameter it's looking for. Is that really going to work? Does that mean that if I go and drop down, it's actually going to work? We'll see. We'll find out in a second. But before I do that, let's go ahead and run this application and make sure that it's actually working as expected. So let's just go ahead in here and run this failing test like this. Oh, that's a lot of angry code. Let's see where we missed here. We might have missed something really tiny. Push this away a little bit. Let's go ahead and build this guy just to make sure things are working. All right, let's see why it's mad at us. Type of student gender. Normally, most of these errors will tell. Okay, maybe a semicolon in here. I'm not sure it really cares about that, but let's just make sure. Okay, it's still failing. So namespace definition in the file. So they really like this guy because of the type of. That's right. So it really doesn't need the type. It needs the actual. Yeah, that's right. So if I put that in here, it should be happy because it does. It's really doing that type off on the back on the base component. I apologize about that. So that should work. Should at least build. There you go. Succeeded. Perfect. Now let's go back into our test here, and let's go ahead and run our test. This time it should pass because I already hooked up the reference. But that's not good enough for us. I'll talk to you a little bit more about what's going to happen next. There you go. So this is basically the guarantee that we have a drop-down, and this drop-down is actually working in the same thing as the component that we're talking to here. All right, that's fantastic. But is it enough? I'll tell you in a second. Let's run our application. Let's make sure it's actually loading in the enum values that we're talking about here. So I can see female, male, other. So it's ordered alphabetically. So yes, I can confirm here that it actually picked up, you know, all the, and I can pass in there anything I want, right? I can create any enum, and it's very generic. This is a piece of gold for you because you're gonna need this a lot, right? How can you build generic Blazor components that basically help you, you know, correspond dynamically to whatever type you have? So this guy's working great, but that's not good enough for us, and I'll tell you why that's not good enough for us. Let's mark this test as pass first, like this. But that's not good enough. Why that's not good enough? Because we want to make sure that we have actually passed in the right generic type to that component. How do I know in any way, shape, or form, and I want this to be strongly typed? I want to make sure that the enum doesn't just exist there, or the dropdown doesn't just exist there. It actually has the right input as a generic type. So let's see what this guy gives us outside of the box here. So you have this dropdown should not be null, but also I want to go and say render student component instance dot student gender dropdown dot. So let's see what options we have here. We have value, right? So can we test the value? Can we say should be of type? Look at this. Look at this magic. And then I can go into that type and say, oh, it should be of the type of the value that I'm passing in. It should be of the type of student view gender view, or student view gender. Like this. And we will make sure that this guy is actually failing for all the right reasons. But let's just go ahead and say, okay, so I'm going to run this guy. And let's just test that this guy is passing first. Let's see if we have the right case in the right place. But we're going to break it because we like to break things. Engineers love breaking things. All right, so this guy is saying the test passed 1.9 seconds. That's a lot of time. We'll talk about optimizing that. That's actually having the student view gender in the value that we're passing in that we expect to be processed. But is that really true? Don't just take it at face value. Don't say, well, my test is passing. Let's just assume that it's doing the right thing. Don't assume anything as an engineer. Let's just go ahead and test this out. So let's go ahead in here and create a dummy enum. So I'm just going to go ahead and say dummy enum. Just a very dummy enum. And here's my enum. Let's put it in here. Let's put value A, B, and C. Great. Perfect. Perfecto. So this is a dummy enum to test our logic here. And I'm going to go here and say dummy enum. And I'm going to also go ahead in here and change this in here into a dummy enum. There you go. All right. Does that break my test? If it breaks my test, it's my happiest day. I'm good. I have no problem. Let's see if that's the case. I usually look at this bottom status, and as you can see here that this guy has failed. Why? Because I expected the type to be student view gender, but I actually found dummy enum. All right, so that's how you ensure that it's not just that you just don't have a drop down, but also that this drop down has the right enum value. All right, so that's that part. All right, great. We're done with this. This is fantastic. Love it. Let's go ahead and clean up the mess that we made here just to ensure that things are not breaking apart. So that's the render part. I'm going to revert these two changes on the component level. I'm going to keep this guy in here, and don't just say we just ran it. Why are you running it again? No, please run the test again after you have reverted your changes to make sure that you actually have everything going green. If you don't have everything going green, you know, there's no guarantee. Obviously, you know, if you are gating your PR with protection, like run the build and all that kind of stuff is great. But if you're working on a project alone and you're pushing to master, that could cause you hours and hours at night trying to fix something that could have been averted by simply just running the test one more time. All right, so this test is passing, so that's great. Let's go and mark this as pass. All right, so I had my enum, and my enum is working fine. The last thing I want to do is to create a DateTime component, a DateTime base component, so I can pass in dates, right? So how do I go about doing that? Exactly the same way. Let's go back to bases, and let's go and say date picker base. That's my date time picker. And a date picker base is much simpler. It's a lot simpler than obviously an enum. This is why I decided to start with an enum, just to show you how things look like. Let's put the back end of that. So that's date picker base.razor.cs. Here's our guy. Let's partialize this baby here. Let's go ahead, add in some copyrights for the good-hearted engineers, some of the best engineers I've ever worked with. And the datetime picker is nothing but actually just the same as your normal input. So if you look at this text box base in here, if you look at the code in the back here, it's pretty much the same. There's much change. The only difference is that we're not actually accepting string values. We're accepting something else. We're accepting a date value. And this date value is super important because it allows the flexibility of, first of all, you're enforcing that type. You're making sure that the type that you're passing is the type that you want. But at the same time, it helps you, not have to worry much about the parsing and the validation and all that kind of stuff. Your base component's already telling you, give me a date time offset and don't talk to me again. Just don't worry about it. I got it. All right. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to do something very similar to this guy here. We're just going to go ahead and say, I want an input parameter. So that's my parameter. That's my parameter right here. This parameter, and instead of string, I'm going to say date time offset, and that's going to be my value right there. And for testing purposes that are going to come very soon, I'm going to build a public method here that says setValue, and it takes in a date time offset, which is the value, and I'm going to go ahead and say, this.value equals value. We'll talk a lot about this, just like we did in here, how you're setting up the value and all that kind of stuff, just exactly like this. I don't think we need this since the placeholder is actually being set up in the UI, so I'm going to take this out. That just keeps things really nifty and compact and, smaller so you can read the code. So that's our code here. We need the front end piece of this. So it's just going to be input type date, like this. And what else? I want to bind the value, right? And I want my bounded value to be value, like this. For now. There's still a lot of things that we have to do. There's a lot of good stuff that I'm going to show you. But for now, this is my date picker base. Let's go ahead and test drive this. Again, let's go back here and say, well, I'm going to put the gender, but also I'm going to go here and say date picker base, excuse me. And that's date of birth picker. Right? So just like we did originally, let's just run a code cleanup because I'm pretty sure I left a couple of things here or there. Code cleanup will basically organize your code, remove all unnecessary usings and all that. Let's write a test for this baby here. So let's go ahead and say date of birth picker. Let's go ahead back here and let's go and say, well, for the date of birth picker, we want to go and say initial student registration date of birth picker should be null, and that guy should fail. So let's just go. Sorry, this guy should pass because it is null. It's not attached to anything. It doesn't have initial value. It's just that. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. There you go. So this guy is passing. Great. Let's go ahead and approve and say that this guy is passing. And then the next one is to just validate that this date picker is not null, right? It doesn't have to have any initial value in it, and it doesn't make sense that to put today's date in it because, when you're setting the date of birth, you don't know really. Could be 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Depends on which student to which school and how many years ago. We're just going to leave it at its initial value and let people, decide what values they want to put in there. And on that note, so let's just go ahead in here and say before the submit button, I'm going to go here and say this dot rendered storage registration component instance dot date of birth picker should not be null, like this. And that guy should fail because I don't have a UI component that actually corresponds to that reference, right? So see how we're test driving UI components and making sure that they do exist on the screen by hard coding. You know, like our tests are very strongly typed. I'm not really scanning an HTML page to find some IDs or any of that stuff. I find that to be not very practical, especially with enterprise real world application. It might get a little hairy when it comes to that stuff. All right, so it says expected the object to be not to be null, which is this guy. So great. We don't have UI for the date of birth. Let's go ahead in here and say fail. Here's my failing test. And let's go back here and say I want to be able to render that guy. And we're going to see it. We're going to run it on the screen and see if it actually passes or not. Luckily, the setup of this guy is much simpler. Here's a PR. And let's go ahead in here and say date picker base reference. You don't need the double quotes. And then you can say student date of birth, or did I say date of birth picker? Okay, perfect. Like this. And there's no other things to put in there. No placeholder, nothing. It's just the date of birth picker. It's going to give me YYMM DD, or the other way around. Let's take a look at it, see what it looks like. There you go. So I could just go ahead in here and say, well, 9, or let's see. There you go. You can put a date in here and you can say whatever you want. You got to set up the date, well, maybe 27. Yeah, so it's the month, the day, and then the year. You can flip it however you want, based on your computer settings. Because it's set on the American settings, it's basically saying, okay, it's going to put the month and then the day. For those of you outside of the United States, if your computer settings is something else, it doesn't really matter, because to the server it'll all come down to date time offset, which should just work fine for you. It should be just as good as anything else. All right, so our date time picker is working. We have a text box, we have all of that, and then we have that submit student, and it's not doing anything. We gotta make sure that it actually does something, because there's no invoke click in here. We didn't pass anything. But let's go back and run our test. Let's just make sure, okay, I see it in the UI, but my code doesn't tell me that my code too can see it. So we want to make sure that our code also can see this. Here you go. And pass. So great. So we built our form. It's not a very pretty form yet, but it basically has all of these components that we need to actually push a student object through the UI all the way down to the API and back. So let's just mark this as pass, and all of this is great. All right. Now, here comes the interesting stuff. We want to be able to do what we call two-way binding. Two-way binding meaning that I can pass in values towards the component, but also the component will update an existing value on my system, an existing object or entity. So I can process that object or entity and actually push it down to the API. That's a two-way binding. So whatever I type in, it updates my model, and whatever my model, any updates that happen to my model will update the UI component. How does that really work exactly? How can you do that? We're gonna start with something really simple. All I really want to do is that, let's go back here. All I really want to do here is that I want to be able to go and say, anytime I enter any values in these text boxes, it should update its equivalent in the StudentView component. All right, so let's go into the StudentView component. Let's do a peek into the StudentView component first, just so I understand what we're talking about here. If I update, I want to be able to say, if I update the identity number text box, it should update the identity number in this StudentView, and so on and so forth. I want to be able to say, if these values change, also will my StudentView component. That's just the one-way street from the UI all the way down to your model, right? Let's see what that looks like. With that, a little bit of change will need to happen, but let's first just hook up an event, and let's see if this event actually gets executed into the system. We want to make sure that when I say on click, and I actually click the button, it'll show me what kind of values are actually bounded in this, and then we're gonna resemble the click simulation. I'm gonna show you all of this today. You're gonna love it a lot. So let me just explain to you the situation here. I want to go and say public void register student. So that's the function that I'm trying to pass in. And it's gonna have to have this, you know, business meaning and business verbiage in it. I want you to be able to say this function is going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's not really doing what you expect it's doing. I'm just going to say var temp variable, and this temp variable will have the this dot student view. So there's this property that I have on my system, which is the student view. We're going to use this just to examine the binding that's happening between our components. Right? The component has a new value. Does it actually update? Let's find out. Let's find out. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. So here's the problem. The problem here is that if I go here and say bind value, and I go and say student view dot identity number like this, two problems are going to occur. Number one problem, it's going to ask you for your base component to provide a value changed event callback property, so it can fill it in with the changes that happened. But even if you do that, it's not good enough because it doesn't really update the component. Let's just walk it through one by one because this is the core of Blazor. We're going into the nitty-gritty of things, and I want you to really understand this because we're going to build greater applications. So here's number one thing. It says object reference is not set to an instance of object. What does that mean? It means that on load, my student view component that I'm trying to bind is not supposed to be null. What it's really complaining about, and the errors are not clear, it's not your fault. I'm going here and saying take that null value and give me the identity number of it because it's the two-way binding street, right? It's two-way street. It's saying you're trying to have me extract that value from that student view, but that student view doesn't have anything assigned to it. And that's a problem, right? So let's go back in here, and let's say this student view here needs to have an initial value on initialization. It needs to not also be null. So how do we go do about that? Let's go and write a test first. Let's write a nice test, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do. So we already verified that this student view should be null, but also that student view on initialization, I'm going to put it at the top here. This dot rendered student component instance student view should not be null. So that's basically me saying it should be at its initial state. Should not be empty as soon as we have already rendered the component, because you're already going and saying on initialize right here, set up some values. And that should be one of the first thing to be set because we're going to build the binding based on it. Let's see this test fail first. Let's go back here and let's see the world burn first. Let's go back into this test and run this first. Here we go. There you go. So this guy said, I expected this to have value in it, but I'm facing problems. Object reference is not set to an instance of an object. I can't load. It failed even before it reached here because it couldn't render that guy. The object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Maybe it makes more sense if I go back here and take out that binding and just see the test fail first. Fail merely because that student component, the student view property doesn't have the right values in it. So let's just go back here and run this. Here we go. I want this to fail for the right reasons. It's not enough for me that it's saying, oh, object reference is not set to an instance. No, that's not the actual reason that I want it to fail for. Here you go. It says expected object not to be null. Now we're failing for the right reasons. Let's go ahead and submit this test as fail. Fail. And let's just submit the failing test, not the other changes that we're doing for, you know, testing purposes, just to explain what's going on. So I committed just this guy. All right, so this guy's failing. Great. Let's go and make sure that it passes. How are we going to do that? I'm going to go into this guy here, and I'm going to say this dot student view equal new student. You have to initialize this guy. You have to. Otherwise, you don't have any container to do a two-way binding here. right? So that's important. So, all right, so we set the state to content, and then, sorry, you set the student view to view, and then you flip the state to content, so it actually tries to load all the components. You may get lucky if you do it. See, the order here is very important. You may actually get lucky with the after content that it's going to try to load, and it's already initializing before it actually leaves this function. It's trying to load the rest of the components. You get in trouble. Like if this is asynchronous, you might get in trouble. It makes more sense to prepare that component that is going to be used by all your UI components first, and then go ahead and mark it as content. If you remember from our last video, based on the state, it chooses whether to make the components available or not. So before I actually flip it to content and try to load all of these components, the text box component and the datetime component and the dropdown component, let's just make sure first that we have that student view in a good shape. All right, and I'm gonna hide this function like this because I want to be able to submit a clean failing code and clean passing code before I do any POC or experimentation. All right, let's go back to our test here. So this test now should be passing. Let's run this guy. Here we go. And it's still failing. Let's see why it's still failing. Expected to be null. What? Maybe my test is wrong. Let's see what I did here. Should not be null. Right. Should not be null. And we said that student view should not be null. And in my base component here, this dot student view. All right. So what's my failing test and why my test is not happy? Expected instance student view to be null but found object. I have another validation in here that I left before the last time we talked. Okay, that's my bad. I did this because last time we said, okay, the student view should be null for now, but not anymore because we're now going into the actual implementation. This is legit, this is good, but now this test should pass because I already removed that condition. I said no on initialization, make sure that the student object is that. There you go. So this guy is now passing flawlessly because the student view should not be null, not anymore, because we're going to use it for binding. Great. And I'm going to show you in a bit why this binding is super important. So let's mark this as pass. Great. So this is pass. What changed in here? I just made this run properly, and I removed a. Okay, perfect. So this guy here should be pass. Perfect. Now let's talk about the binding. Let's visualize the binding first. I want you to visualize this just so you understand that any changes that happen, it's one cycle between the component and the value itself, the object that you're working with. Let's see if I can find a nice empty place here. There you go. All right, so let's take this out. So what is the theory? What's the theory behind what I'm talking about? Imagine that this is your UI component. And imagine that this is an object model. A two-way binding, they literally call it this way. Let's make this two-way binding. Let's flip the flag on this one like this. Yeah. A two-way binding in here is basically the idea of going and saying, if this changes, then this should change. And if this changes, then this should change. So if any changes happened here in the UI, on the UI, then go ahead and change the object value. And if anything happens on the object, we want to have this update the UI. So if some backend code is changing your object values, that should immediately reflect over here. And the other way around. That's why they call it two-way binding. From the object to the UI component and from the UI component to the object. I want you to remember this very well because you're going to use it a lot, and this is a very, very UI concept. All right, so okay, basically, okay, it's binding, but if you look at it from a high level perspective as a back-end engineer or full stack engineer or an architect, this is basically an observer pattern, right? Because anything that changes in one place will change another. You know, not a good idea if I change one piece of your code and three other classes fail for no reason. That's just called spaghetti code. But very, very highly recommended when you know that when you actually expect that all the observers of your event, when the event happens, the observers will actually change to reflect that change and react based on it. So why do we care about that? We care about that simply, my friend, because we want to be able to bind the values in this student view to these components in here. So I want to be able in here to go and say bind value equals, and the value that I want to bind is the student view dot student identity or identity number. If I run this application today, you will notice something very strange, but it's good. You're going to get an error that tells you you don't have a parameter, called value changed. When you bind a value like this, you're basically saying, hey, this component offers a value changed event callback that should help you process whatever happens when this value changes. Let's run it and let's see that error happen first. Here we go. Come on, error out. There you go. So you see, it says that text box base does not have a property matching value changed. So let's just listen to it, It says I don't know how to bind to a component that doesn't actually give me that capacity to pass in or actually trigger the event that says value change. That's the subscriber model, right? So how do I go about doing that? Since this is a text box, I could just go ahead in here and create a parameter. And this parameter called event callback, it's really important that the type of your event callback to match the type of your value. And let's call it value changed like this. All right, does this make it happy? It should, but it's not going to make us happy because when we actually type data in there, the data is not going to show up, and I'm going to explain to you why our data is not going to show up. So let's run this real quick. Here we go. Be happy, be happy. So it's happy. So if I type stuff like this and I click submit, it's going to fail because I didn't pass in a function. Let's put a dummy function in there. Since this is a base component, I don't really have to test it. It's like brokers. They just encapsulate all the primitive and native events. What really matters to me is what my own component is doing. So let's just go ahead in here and type this. Let's say public void register student. I haven't done anything with that yet, right? And I'm just going to go ahead in here and say, just create temp, and this will have student view. And I'm going to show you here, the reason why I'm doing this is that I want to show you that the value is not really, there is no binding that happened. Your value here didn't change. I'm going to take that registered student here and pass it as an input parameter to my button. So in here I say on click, here, register student like this. So I'm passing in this onClick function, and I'm gonna run my component again. And when I click it, it'll actually hit the breakpoint because it's great. But the problem here is that it's not actually gonna reflect the value that I passed in. Look, here's my student view. Clickety click. Your identity is null. So the binding didn't really happen. It didn't know how to take that value from the changes that I made in that text box and pass it down to you when you press the button to register the component. And that's a big problem. So how do we solve that problem? This is the stuff that I really love to show people what to do about it, because this is a problem. A lot of people ask that question. I want to show you how to answer that question, right? It's okay, I have the value changed, but I haven't really done anything with that value changed, right? Why don't we just go ahead in here and just create a little function. I'm going to say private task, right? And I say OnValueChanged. You can call this anything you want, okay? And let's call this change Eventargs. Here's my change Eventargs. And what I'm gonna do instead is that every time the value in this text box change, I'm gonna register that function as an event in your native input text box. I will show you what that does in 1 minute. But before I do that, let's just go ahead and fix this function. So this is this.value, so that's this value that I have in here. Some people might frown upon using this for non-class member because it's a property. It's fine. I will use it. Judge me for it. Okay, so there's this guy, and I want to take the value that has changed. So these change Eventargs dot value dot toString. Why toString, Hassan? Because this value is an object. It can be anything, and I'm going to show you in a second in some of these base components how this value can be a date time offset. It can be an enum. It can be anything. So we have to cast it somehow. We have to cast it somehow. So dot toString is fine. You want to say as string, whatever you want. And then in here, I'm going to return that the value changed, which is this guy here. I'm going to trigger that event. Like every time, let me explain this. Every time you're doing a binding, when you change the value, it'll trigger that event. And what that event is going to do is going to call that OnValueChange. So see that OnValueChange is going to actually execute that event that the parent component is giving to you. So I'm just going to invoke this guy async, invoke async, and I'm going to pass in the value. What? What is this weird stuff that I just did? What I'm basically saying is that I want to be able to register that event. So every time that event is passed in as a parameter, I need a triggerer for that event. See, originally it was complaining. It said you can't do binding if you don't give me value changed as input parameter. Okay, so the parent component is giving you this value changed. It's giving you a function that you can take a look at. But nothing is executing this function. We want something to kick off this function, right? I've seen a lot of people on the internet, they go and really play around the getters and setters of the value and do a lot of stuff. I didn't really like it. I want to write some code for you, that something for you to vaguely remember or very strongly remember. Otherwise, your development experience is not enjoyable, and therefore it's going to be hard for you to be productive. So I want you to understand this. You're basically passing in a value change as input parameter. Don't worry, I will push all that code publicly on OSSS.portal in GitHub, so you can actually take a look at it and see the progress of this while you're watching the videos. By the time you're watching that video, I may have already pushed that code to that repo, so feel free to go back and see what I did there. But I really highly recommend you follow through with what I'm doing in here. So this OnValueChange, well, we still have the same problem. I did reassign the value here for the binding, but this OnValueChange have not been called. So what do I do then? I can go here and say, well, that's easy. I could just go here and say on input, and I can go here and say value changed, on value changed. See what I just did? I'm basically saying every time you're typing, trigger this function. And this function will already have a parameter that says, hey, by the way, the value has changed. Oh, then I'm going to go and say, oh, update that value. Keep updating that value. Is that really how it works? I don't know. Don't take my word for it. The best thing about computers and software engineering is that there's no room for speculations. It either works or it doesn't. That's it. The question is about the cost. How much does it take to try one approach or the other? So let's just put a student identity, I don't know, ABC123, and let's just click Submit Student. Now here's the moment of truth. Does it actually bind these values to that property? If I hover over here and drop down, what do you know? ABC123. That's it. You've done the binding. It's very simple. All you had to do is just go and say bind to that value and make sure that base component is updating that value immediately when that happens. All right, since most of these changes are happening on the base components. I'm not really testing any of it. I don't care about the base components. They can be rewritten from scratch. It doesn't matter. What matters to me is that they give me functionality that helps me test my actual component. So how do you go about testing something like that? And how do you go about actually testing the submit functionality, which is what this is all about? Well, that's a good question. Let's go ahead in here and say, I really don't care about this function anymore. And I'm going to hide my binding in here. I'm going to take that binding completely out. So I'm going to take this out because that's not part of the test. And I'm going to take that binding completely and utterly out like this. Why? Because we have to test drive things. We can't just, this is not, you know, we're not animals. We have to test things, right? So, all right, so let me submit this piece. So this piece here is basically saying, you know, update, implement binding to text box base. There's nothing, there's no failing test in here. We're just saying, hey, we're updating our broker, our base component. Let's go ahead and write a test in here. And let's say, well, I have a new test. Should submit student. We might turn it into async later. We'll see. Here's my given. Here's my when. Here's my then. And here we go. I need to start by generating a random student view so I can use these values, right? But that's not the right way to do things. Why it's not the right way to do things? Well, you know, you can do it this way. It's one way to do it, but I personally recommend you make sure that you're not passing an entire object and expecting it to come from the other side, because that's not really testing. So let's just create one. Let's go ahead in here. Do I have a student? Let's go and use dynamics. So I'm going to go ahead and say private static filler. And filler is basically the library dynamics filler that helps you generate random value for a particular model. So that's filler right here. And then in here, I'm just going to go ahead and say create student filler. Here's my guy. And, you know, var filler equal new student, new filler student view. These fillers are not really big fans of date time offsets, so that's the only thing that I'm going to have to build, but everything else is randomized. So filler.setup, and then on type date time offset, like this. I'm just going to set up any date time offset. I'm going to go and say use date time offset. It's just random, it doesn't matter. Here we go. And then I'm going to return that filler. Okay, so that's one function. I'm going to separate this function because sometimes you will need to return many fillers. Excuse me. So that's a possibility. So let's go ahead in here and say private, also private static student view. And in here I'm going to say create random student view. So this guy is going to create a random student view for me. I don't really think I need the scope. I could just go here and say create student filler dot create. So that should give me a random student view that I can use in my test. Wonderful. Let's go back to my test here and say, okay, well, that's a student view, and this is random student view equals create random student view. That's number one. Number two, I want a student view, which is my expected student view. We're going to build another one called return student view, but not just yet, one step at a time. And that takes random student view, and maybe we should create another one, which is the input student view. Random student view here, and that would be my input student view. And that guy will be just the same as input. It just shows you the progression of things. So when you name things, they make sense. All right, that's great. Now what do I want to test? I want to start passing in values and validating that these values actually have changed the value of my system. Right, so I'm just going to go ahead in here and say this dot rendered component equal render component dot student registration component. And a part of my when, I'm going to start setting values. And that brings me back to this whole method. Like some people might have wondered, why did you do this set value? Oh, it's literally because of that. Because I'm passing in this set value and I want to see if it actually flips the binding of your data, and that might actually conflict with the value change stuff, but we'll see. I just want to verify that this value change and the box that I'm passing the value in is actually making sense. All right, so let's see if that works for us. I don't know. Let's find out. Let's go back here and say in my rendered student component dot instance dot student identity text box dot set value. Look, and in this set value guy, I'm just gonna go ahead in here and say, well, in set value, I need the input student view dot identity. So that's my random value right here. So what does that verify? I want to go back here and say, well, then this dot rendered student registration component dot instance dot student view dot identity number should be equivalent to, all of this is going to change very dramatically. Just bear with me for a second. Expected student view that identity. That's all I care about. I want to know that my binding is actually working the way I expect it to. So this set value guy is the equivalent of me saying pass in a value to this text box. Pass the value in and show me what happens. The exact same idea. Is that really the case? Let's find out. We already did binding on that value. So this guy originally should fail, completely crash and burn, because I didn't really set the values yet. I didn't set the binding yet. So the build succeeded. I look at this guy at the bottom here, and the run finished, and it basically said I expected this random value, gopum, whatever it is, I expected that the value of the string to be this, but I actually found null because I really didn't set up the binding yet. I really didn't set up the binding yet. So let's go ahead and set up the binding for this guy. Let's mark this guy as fail. Here's a failing guy, and let's go ahead and see our component and how it is working. So I'm going to go back here and say, well, now let's back again to this bind value, right? And in this bind value, I want to go and say, well, student view dot identity number. Does this make my test pass? Let's see. Maybe we can get lucky today and it'll work with us. Let's find out. Let's run this guy. Build succeeded. And we have a failure. Let's see why. Expected string. Actually, wait a second. We can do this even better. We can go back here and say student view identity number. Holding off on this until we actually click the button. Let's go ahead in here and say student identity number text box. That value should match that expected student view. So I want to make sure that this text box actually has the right value in here. Let's see if that works. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Well, let's find out. Here it is. I just want to know that I want to know first that this text box has the right values in it. And then we will talk about, there you go. So this guy is passing. Wonderful. So I know that this text box, that I inserted that information into that text box and it actually kicked off that process and it actually persisted that value in. Fantabulous. Let's do the same for the rest. Let's just make sure that the rest of those are actually doing the same thing. And then at the very end, we're going to verify that when we're submitting, that we're actually passing in that student view all the way down to this guy. Let's see if that works out. So I'm going to go ahead and log this as a success, pass, and let's do the rest, the same for the rest. Let's do the same for the rest. So how many boxes I have here? I have many of these. So let's just go ahead and make sure that this is faster. you go. All right, so we have student identity number. We have student first name. We have student middle name. And we have student last name. So these are all the text string. We didn't get to the dates yet, right? So in these strings, let's go ahead in here and say first name, middle name, and last name. And then at the end here, so first name, middle name, last name. Okay, that's all of these. And then in here, I want to go and say student, the gender. And that guy doesn't have a value, and we're going to fix that in a second. So for this guy, it's something very similar. Let's go back to the Dropdown Base. And let's set up the right things here. We need a parameter. And in that parameter, it's going to need an event callback with that tenum in there. Tenum, like this. And that's value changed event. All right, great. And then something very, very similar to this guy here, except that we're going to change a tiny detail. We want to make sure that this guy actually accepts that tenum value. So let's go ahead in here and say, instead of this, we want to go and say, cast that tenum for enum.parse. Come on. Here's the value here, system. And then let's go and say parse. Here you go. And this guy takes the type, right? So that's type of tenum. Let me zoom out a little bit. And the value is right there. So this guy, what this guy is doing is basically going saying, give me the string value and give me the type. And I'm going to, push back whatever, an object that matches that. So that's why we need to, this is under 120 characters. That guy should just give you back the value, and it should match that tenum value. And we're going to demo this. We're going to take a look at this and all that kind of stuff. Okay, this is value has changed. That means I can go back here and I say in that select guy, I can go and say input changed on input. Go ahead and pass this on value changed. Perfect. Every time that dropdown will change, it'll change your application. It'll work just like a charm. All right, so I have this in there. And I probably, while I'm at it, let me do this for the datetime picker as well, right? Because the datetime picker is going to be the exact same problem. So let's go ahead in here and say on input, right, on value changed, which is going to be something very similar in the datetime picker. You want a parameter, and you want a public event callback, datetime offset, and this is value changed, same thing. And I want, so that's this guy, and I want the text box like this guy. So I have the set value. Oh, did I actually put a set value in here? I didn't. Let's go back here. That's actually the void set value tenum value, passing in an enum, and then this dot value equal value. Great. And we don't need the, again, we don't need the scopes just to force a habit. Let's go ahead in here and put that guy like this. Okay, perfect. So that will help me with my test. And then in the datetime picker, this is the same thing. This task on value changed. The difference here is that when I'm doing the mapping for the datetime, it's not as crazy. You just can go and say datetime parse and just parse the string. So datetime offset dot parse. There you go. Boom, done. On value changed. We set up for the datetime picker. All good and dandy, all on the broker side. We have no problem here. There's nothing to worry about in here. All right, so this is set datetime picker. But now for the gender, you have set value. That's great. And also this dot rendered student component dot instance student date of birth. Say value input student view dot date of birth date. All right, so this is great. So now we're setting all of these values, and now we just want to verify that these values actually have the right information in them. So let's just go verify that. Let's go ahead in here. Here's our guy. Let's take this one up. We could actually use these to actually verify that. So let's use these. We're lazy engineers. Let's do that. Let's go ahead in here and do this. And for instead of this, it would be student middle name. There you go. Student last name. There you go. Last name. And also you want the did we do the identity number? Yep. I didn't do first name actually. There you go, first name. Let's move this guy upstairs a little bit. Alt up and down, it'll move the so identity number, first name, middle name, last name, and then I want the gender. Right, so let's take that guy here and say yep, gender. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So this is dot value. Value should be equivalent to student first name. Should be equivalent to and all of it. And then dot value, and dot value. Like this. So technically, all of this should pass. I think this should be like that because it's a date time. I'm actually surprised this one didn't complain too, but I'm gonna make it should be. So this guy's saying whatever values I set there, it's actually persisted in this box, and I actually can see it in this box. So that's just one step. We're not done yet. Just a one step closer. So let's just go ahead in here and run this. And this guy should technically pass. There you go. Total test, one passed. Happy. No problem there. Let's submit that stuff. But obviously that's not good enough, right? It's not good enough because we want to actually verify that we have actually made the call to submit that student view all the way downstream. We want to go and say, yeah, we actually did do that. We actually did change when we set the value for that student. We actually did change that value. So how do we go about do that? We want to go and say, go ahead and do a this.rendered student component instance dot submit button dot click. And that click will help us go down here and say verify this dot mock verify service dot add student view async that has this dot rendered component dot instance dot student view has been called times once. So the clicking on the button will ensure us that we have actually pushed that student view downstream, and this guy will fail. It has to. But before we finish that, let's just verify that this mock has no other calls have happened to it. This guy for sure 100,000% will fail. It'll fail simply because we haven't hooked up any integration. We haven't done any integration yet, which is problematic. So let's go ahead and run this code and let's see where the world take us. There we go. Fail. There you go. And this guy is failing why? It's saying object reference is not set to an instance of an object. The click event doesn't have any event set up for it, which is great. Let's go and set that event up. So let's just mark this as fail first. Like this. And let's go ahead and actually set up our component in a way that is not dramatic. So let's go ahead and here now we can set up that click event. We can go ahead and here say public, and I want it to be asynchronous because we're gonna make an asynchronous call. So async task. Here's where things get very interesting. Register student async, and in that guy I'm gonna go and say await.student view service dot add student async this dot student view. So I'm making an API call here. I can one line this guy. So I'm making an API call here, and I need to hook up that API call to my button. So in here I need to go and say on click register student async. Is it gonna be cool with that? I don't know. Let's find out. See that problem? It's saying no, I can't do it this way. What happens if I go and say take that async out? Like this. Would it be happier? One way you can solve around this problem, which is a lot of people see that problem, is that you can turn that into an action because your onClick event expects an action. Like if you go back down to your button here, it's saying give me an action. I don't care what action you're giving me, just give me an action that I can execute. What you can do is that you can actually turn this into an action. You can go here and say, oh, well, you want an action, here's an action. But that's a discussion for another day. I still have to walk you through some of the events that we need to do here to actually make this a bit more graceful to work with, right? And even this guy is a little bit, let's do it this way. There you go. There's your action. There you go. Now the question is, does this make this guy happy? I don't know. Let's find out. Here's our value. Here's our execution. And this guy is returning. This guy actually is returning a value task. That's why this guy's not going to be very happy with it. So I guess we have to scope it. Let's scope it. Because we really don't care about the return value. We're not going to do anything with it. Not yet. Not yet, but we will. Alright, so this is a task. Why this guy's mad? It's saying not all paths return a value, and that's because of the situation that we have here. And I guess this is one of these cases where you can actually go and say, well, here, what if I do this for it? Would that be happy? A lot of people don't really like async void, but this is a very good case. You don't want to return a fake task. And you also don't want to return the student. Not just yet. We're going to change that. But for now, I don't, right? So I'm just going to go ahead in here and say this. This will make it happy temporarily. And you don't even need that guy here, I don't think, because you're basically saying, I can pass in an action accordingly. Let's see what it does. Yeah, it should technically be happy with that because it's kind of an action. And we're gonna talk a little bit about this later. Like, don't take this for granted. Don't take this as final. But this is just one thing that I'm doing in here. Does this, now the real question here, does this make my test pass? And more importantly, does it actually submit anything to that service? Let's see what that does. And here you go. So now you have actually test driven the actual submission of the student. Let's see if that actually works. And I will stand up my API for you here to show you how this works. So this is pass. Great. Let's go ahead and run this guy. I'm going to put a breakpoint inside this function just to show you what's actually happening in here from a submission standpoint. And here's my code. And I'm going to actually type some stuff in here like ABC123, first name Hassan, M, Habib, and here's a male, and here's 27, 9, 19, hang on a second, 1985, 27. There you go. And this should be 9. Got it. Okay. 9/27/1985. I got all that detail. So if I submit, does it actually hit my API? Let's find out. I think I need to refresh this guy. Errored out a little bit ago. ABC123 Hassan. This is the moment of truth. This is what all of these weeks have been about. Mail 9/27/1985. What is that error that I received? Reload. Interesting. What is that? Let's zoom out a little bit so I can change the months. Let's see. Look at all these years. If I put 1985, is it happy? Okay, and here's mail. ABC123 Hassan M Habib. Submit. There you go. So does this student view actually have the values that I passed in? Let's find out. Well, I have only a bit of it. I have ABC123, but I don't have the rest of those. Let's set up our binding first for each and every one of those. Let's bind the values for these. Bind value, bind value, bind like this. And let's bind these ones as well. And for that date picker as well, we want to bind the values. We're going to fix this in a second. So this is identity, that's first name, that's middle name, and that's last name. And in here I have the gender. Obviously this guy's going to be happy because we set up the types so nicely that it won't complain about any of these issues. Alright, this is great. Let's go and run this again and see if that works out. And then maybe we'll investigate the issue with the dates. Here you go. Student identity, ABC123. Hassan M. Habib. Male. 1985. Submit. Alright. Does it actually give me the values I'm looking for? There you go. So Hassan, male, ABC123, Habib M. Wonderful. And it has the dates. It has everything in it. Isn't that great? The last step that I want to show you here is that to actually show you this working in the database, to show you this actually working in the database itself. Is that really the case? Let's find out. Let's go here, say finalize binding like this, and let's go ahead and verify. So I'm gonna open up OSSS, the actual application. And I'm going to make sure I hook up these APIs so they actually talk to each other. I actually haven't tried this. Let's see if we can actually get latest, run the application, and make sure it actually accepts. Once it hit our API, I think our job is done, but it would be really, really cool if we could actually show the student in the database. So we have a post student in here. I'm going to put a breakpoint on this guy here. All right, so that means it's going to go all the way up from the UI all the way and hit the API, and then our session would be technically done for today. And then we'll talk a little bit more about fixing the UI, making the UI a little bit more accessible, a little bit more beautiful, and all that kind of stuff. But before I do that, let's just make sure that we got latest, and let's run our acceptance test to make sure that the student gets posted and deleted and all that kind of stuff. I want a confirmation, and that's the beauty of these unit and acceptance tests. They actually give you a real feel about what's actually happening and whether your service is ready to actually process real data or not. So let's just see. So we have about 1,000. So the contributions on this project just continue to happen every single day of every single week, even during holidays and breaks and stuff like that. Good-hearted engineers from all over the world working on daily basis to make sure that this software is actually up and running and ready to go and for people to use it. Let's see if that works. This acceptance test is actually hitting the actual real database. So I can see a lot of green here, and I can see the student going green, and the acceptance is okay. So this guy is ready. This guy is actually ready to run end to end. So let's run this API real quick. Let's have this API running, and let's set up our UI to actually send that object downstream to that API. Okay, so this is a funny message that I put. Hello, Mario. The princess is in another castle. What this basically means, it basically says that your API is running without any dependencies, right? Like, this is going to help you a lot to know if your instance is running first when it's deployed to the cloud without actually running through any dependency. If you actually have a running instance, if it's a problem with the infrastructure or a dependency that you have in the system. All right, so that's this guy. And then let's just make sure that our portal is set up correctly from a configuration standpoint. Do I have the right local host in here? I don't. That's bad. So that's the local host, and let's just make sure that our API brokers here are doing the right thing from. So yeah, it does type the API for me, but it does need that slash. Otherwise, it can't do it. So I have a running API, and if I go into my running API here and I put like this and I say API/students and I do a get. Let's see if it's going to give me anything back. I might have some test data in there. Yeah, I have a little bit of everything. But definitely, if I search here and I say Hassan, I can't find anything, right? So that's great. That means like all of this is test data. You know what? Let's clear up the database while we're at it. Let's just go ahead and OSSS core, and let's navigate to the database, and let's just make sure our database is completely empty. Databases, OSSS database, and then this is a new query. I can go here and say delete from students, run. So 37 rows destroyed. Let's go and search again. It should give me an empty array. Okay. So now when I post to the API, from the UI, from Blazor, all the way down to the API, it should show me just the one record that I posted in. Is that the case? I don't know. Let's find out. So where is my, so this is my OSSS portal. I'm going to run this guy now. And that's going to be a very, very interesting moment. I promise you, unlike a lot of other things I do, I haven't actually tried this out. ABC123, I mean, not in this project. I've done it many times before, but not in this project. So this is Habib. Let's put male, 1985, not 84, 85. Hold on. 1985, male, BC123, Hassan, M. Habib. I need, okay. All right, moment of truth. Submit student. And as you can see, this is our API endpoint. See, this endpoint is our API, and it actually has the right data. Oh, wow, look at this. So if I run, does it actually persist? We didn't say show us anything, so therefore it's not, the UI is not really doing anything yet. But if I go back to my API and I push this like this, boom, here is my object from the UI all the way down to the API, and then persisted in the database just like that, right? So you can see here that the entire thing have been submitted without any issues, completely successful. So that basically goes back to this map that we draw in here. What really happened is that, let me take this out. What really happened, this is really what happened. If you look here, so our component here, our student component, basically used 3 base components, and we actually finalized these 2 base components today, so we can actually mark them as green. This guy is green. There you go. So our student registration component, we typed in some data there. It went through the view service, the service hit the broker, called the API, went to the controller, hit the service, hit the broker. I don't know why this guy's red. I don't remember what I was talking about. Hit the broker, and then boom, landed exactly in the database where we want it to be. All right, that's the entire pipeline end to end. Like at this very moment, what we have been working for in the last 8 and 9 videos, which is over 11 hours worth of demonstration and details. That's this entire pipeline right there, especially all the way down to this guy. And then that pipeline is in another series of videos. That's all you need to see. So that's that. That's our student component. Now if I can change this, to different things, I can go here and say, well, this new student is 200. You can play around, right? Let's say Michael J. Fox. And then I don't know when Michael J. Fox was born. Submit. Hit the API. Back to the student. Here is our postman. And I should have two students. Here's Michael J. Fox. And here's Hassan. Just like that. All right. So that basically concludes our session today. We're not done yet, obviously. That's why I left the component in the orange state, but I marked the other base components as green because I still need to show you what it looks like when the request fails, right? We still need to talk about that. I need to show you how to beautify that component to look in a better state. We still need to talk about security, right? We need to talk about security. You need to log in and register and all that kind of stuff. And more importantly, at the end, I need to show you how to move from one page to another, using the navigation manager, to say that that student have been submitted successfully. Thank you for registering the student, instead of just staying there on the same form and allowing, iteration of submission and all that kind of stuff. And more importantly, there's also the setup of the pages and the login. We're going to talk a little bit about styling your Blazor components and all that. But today is a very special day. This particular video is very important because I'm basically showing you that entire pipeline. We finally are poking a hole through the system, from the UI all the way down to the API and back. Right? And back meaning that the response from the API, that it actually succeeded, which we're going to talk about, in the next video. I hope this was useful for you. I apologize for the very long sessions, not just this one, but the ones before that. But so is everything in life. It needs patience. You need to be patient. You need to, take your sweet time and actually learn the things that you want to be good at. Otherwise, it's not really worth it. There's so much more about Blazor to talk about, and I'm very glad that I could show you this binding and simplification and test driving, posting a student object and all that kind of stuff. But there's still more. We're going to talk a little bit about so much more, and I have so much more to share with you. As usual, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy. I really enjoy your questions and I enjoy your concerns. And actually, some of the questions I receive are things that actually gets me to look up and see if I can actually turn this into something useful. And I learn a lot from these. And it actually helps me evolve the coding standard, and make sure I'm going to leave a comment, I'm going to leave a link in the description about the coding standard and guidelines, just so it's basically a collective series of articles and ideas and, experimentations, trials and errors that actually help me at the end of the day come up with a coding standard and an architecture standard that actually help the engineers actually enjoy the process. I enjoy every single line of code I write, and I hope that you enjoy the same thing, watching me doing it, and then you're doing it yourself. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section, and do not forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video.